Hello, welcome to MHTV. Really delighted to have you with us tonight. We've got a special guest who I'll introduce in just a second. And tonight we're going to be talking about all the different ways that you can be a nurse. So we'll be talking about our new friend's journey through different parts of nursing. And we'd obviously love to hear from you as well. So in order to do that, let me hand over to Dave and he can tell you how you can join in tonight. Dave?
Hi everyone, it's great that you can join us tonight. So as always, we've got a couple of ways you can join in. The first is on Facebook Live. Just head over to the side if you want to make any comments or questions, just pop them in and we'll try and bring in some as we go along. The other option you've got, as always, is on X. If you want to post with the hashtag MHTV, I'll be looking for that. And again, we'll try and bring in any comments that we get over there. But without further ado, straight back to you, Nicky.
Okay, let's have an introduction from our guest. Tegan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, and hi guys. Thanks for having me on the show today. My name's Tegan. I'm a mental health nurse by background. So I qualified in 2018, and since then I specialised in perinatal mental health, inpatient and community. And in November 2023, started working as a senior lecturer in mental health nursing at Montfort University in Leicester, and that's where I am today.
All right. So one of the reasons we have obviously got Tegan on today is to talk about kind of different roles, different times of your life and in your career as a nurse, and also just to find out a little about how you might make decisions if you were deciding to, change direction or expand your focus, how you might do that. So maybe you can talk us back over how you made those sorts of choices.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't mind starting from the very beginning,
Yeah.
before I even decided to be a mental health nurse, really.
Mm.
And I still feel to some extent, if not more so now, there's that expectation that by the time you're 12 or 13, you're meant to know what you want to do for the rest of your life as a career, as a job. And I was very lucky in that my dad is an adult nurse, so I think drew inspiration from him in terms of wanting to follow sort of the nursing profession, but really sort of learned that there was other fields of practice to specialise in as I sort of chose my A levels, so psychology being one of them, and then I started volunteering for Mind at the age of 16 of a Saturday, just as a volunteer support worker, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and it opened my eyes to the difference that mental health charities, mental health support can offer to, patients, carers, people that use the service and their families. So I started to think about actually following the career of a mental health nurse and going into that. Obviously, I suppose probably an atypical journey for a student. When I did that, I went to university in 2015, Stafford University. I trained there for 3 years. I think it's really good to have the opportunity through placements to find out A, what you really want to do, but also B, you'll have placements where you kind of think, actually, that's definitely not the route I want to go down. And it was really sort of in my last year that I was torn between forensic mental health and perinatal mental health. So I applied for both, and my first interview was at a specialist parent and baby unit, and was offered the position and felt over the moon and really lucky. And that was where I started my journey as a mental health nurse on an inpatient mental health mother and baby unit. And that's where it all started, really. And ever since then, I still feel like I've got that same enthusiasm that I had 6 years ago, and it hasn't left me.
So once you sort of like bedded in to the kind of practice world, because that's the first bump to go over, isn't it, from qualifying to just getting even that first year done, your preceptorship done. What was that like for you?
I think I've heard to it referred as imposter syndrome, some of those feelings of I'm too young to do this, I'm too inexperienced, I'm too insert negative words here to do this has stayed. But I felt so overwhelmingly privileged to be in that position that I grabbed every opportunity with both hands. I really immersed myself in every, I suppose everything that I could do on that, in that position. I really sort of, I suppose, in terms of fundamental patient care, that's where I learned, I suppose, my foundations really. in terms of holistic patient care, care planning, medication, you know, I suppose that the basics of nursing practice. I felt like it was a really positive start to my journey, as I had, you know, everyone on the ward was so welcoming and friendly and encouraging and promoting of my development and my learning. And I've always been, I feel lucky to have that in the you know, the positions that I've had. So I found that was sort of, for me anyway, a really good starting point. I think there was always, and there still is now, the emphasis on the importance of perinatal mental health, and therefore we were lucky that we generally would have adequate staffing, which I know in the NHS is not always the case. Yeah. So yeah,
I think you said a couple of really important things there. So first part is, because I think sometimes when you go from placement to placement, it can feel almost like just a series of really traumatic job interviews. You know, you're trying to pass a course, and at the same time, you're really aware that you're being judged on your performance all the time when you genuinely still don't really know what you're doing. And it can feel quite tense until you actually think about the fact that actually you're looking at them too. They need staff, and they want the best students to come to them. So you get to see people in a way that normally when you have a job interview, you only get like 20 minutes with somebody. You don't really know what they're like. They don't really know what you're like. Whereas when you're on a placement, you see the good and the bad. You see how teams work together. You get to understand what your preferences are. Do you like to work in a team? Do you like to work by yourself? Are there particular populations you enjoy working with that you find satisfying? Areas where you know for sure you don't want to go back to. And that really helps, I think, because nobody knows what they want to do at the start.
No,
you know,
and I think
like, who knows what they want to do when they're 12? Even when you're a nurse, I think there's so many different types of ward and there's so many different types of experience. No one could just know.
No, absolutely. I was going to say as well, I think what really helped, I think that specialism, having that placement there, was seeing not only the impact that it had on the patients who were on the ward, you know, the people that were using the service, but also the wider family unit and the carers and the amount of support that was offered to, you know, the other children in the family and parents and relatives, and it therefore, I suppose, having such a wider impact on you know, not just the person who was admitted to that unit, but on the family context, and therefore on wider society. And I think sometimes nursing might be regarded as a thankless job at times, and I never felt that. I always felt that there was always generally, I suppose, gratitude, and people felt that they had a positive experience on that, you know, on the ward, and that I think therefore you feel good doing that job because you feel you're actually making, you know, helping create positive outcomes for people, which really, I think, kept me wanting to stay in perinatal services.
And do you think that doing the kind of working with the voluntary sector, particularly Mind, you do such an amazing job with campaigning, with support, and also with really important job of critiquing mental health services. How did that influence you, do you think?
I think, if I'm being completely honest, it opened my eyes to the, I suppose, prevalence in the first instance of mental health. I think I was initially quite naive in terms of what, you know, I suppose you read statistics and I suppose, you know, you watch videos, but actually working with people who were suffering with their mental health and how much it was impacting them on a, you know, a day-to-day basis, how it was impacting them in terms of not being able to seek work and not being able to maintain work. I think it really highlighted the prevalence and how much of an impact poor mental health has on a person's life. And it was, I think, it was a Saturday, so I used to go in like between my A levels on the weekends, and I'd, you know, people would come in, and sort of it was a drop-in centre. We'd make cups of tea, we'd have sort of meaningful conversations with people. We worked towards a recovery star model, which I think, seeing the difference over the course of a year, building these relationships with people and seeing how much of an impact positively it was having on their lives, and leading to them feeling more confident to have conversations with people outside of the group, because naturally, I suppose, these relationships and, you know, the rapport came over time, but the people learning that they could trust and have conversations with people and knowing that they were safe in that environment, I think helped people to feel like they could go on to seek connections outside of that format too. So it was eye-opening, but also inspirational, because it made me believe that there was hope and that I could make an impact.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the things we really talk about that's interesting as well, is that idea about, and I really hate the term sort of soft skills, because they're not soft. And
Yeah.
there's still a lot of people who are just not very good at talking to people, not really, and listening and actually having a real interest in what the other person is saying. And those skills are so important. I bet that really set you up well. I mean, I love it when I hear like a student has worked in retail or in a pub or anything that requires that kind of human interaction. So I think they just make so much better nurses.
Nicky, I couldn't agree more with you. And I think someone said to me, it might have been my other half, actually, I don't want to name drop, but he always said to me, you've got 2 ears for listening and 1 mouth for talking. So spend more time listening, less time talking.
Constant battle for me. I feel
I
like
think
I've
it's hard.
1,001 ear. I'm always trying to change it back round. So tell
No,
me, go on.
no, I was going to say you're absolutely right.
So you got to the stage where, you know, you'd embedded, you'd found a career that was really making you happy. What was the next stage of your journey for you?
So, unfortunately, there were, I suppose, issues. Things had happened on the ward, which unfortunately changed the structure, changed, I suppose, overall, I suppose, generally well-being to some extent, and kind of made me think I'm ready for progression. I'm ready for something different. I'm ready to, I suppose, for a challenge, ready for a challenge and ready for a change. So I sort of had a look around what was available, and I suppose the more that I worked on the ward, I suppose I was more aware of what services were, I suppose, available for me to sort of consider branching out to. And I was fortunate enough that a position became available as a community mental health nurse, attached to the mother and baby unit, but in the community team. So it was, I suppose, took the decision to apply for that position and was really lucky to attain that post. So still working with liaising with the ward, but being a care coordinator and nurse in the community as opposed to inpatient, but still perinatal, which was where my heart still lies, really.
Well, I think that's the next really important thing for nurses in their career to realise is that change is inevitable. So you find the perfect team, you find a job you love, managers change, services merge, and it slips away. And I think a lot of people kind of really grieve that, but it's got to happen. It's really important that you keep growing and you keep changing and the service keeps improving, and also for people to remember how valuable an asset they are. So if you are not treated well, go where you are loved, go where you are properly educated, properly supported, properly staffed. Don't sacrifice yourself, I would say. And I think sometimes that's when the NHS can be a little bit less than a healthy workplace, is that sometimes it sucks people into staying in environments which aren't good for them or for service users. And sometimes you've got to vote with your feet to get feedback heard.
And I don't think it was ever that I felt that it was not where I wanted to be anymore. I think it just, due to the things that happened, made me feel that actually I was ready for the next step in my own, I suppose, career, my own, I suppose, professional journey. And I suppose it's hard, isn't it? Like, it's always that fear of failure to some extent. But I always think if you don't try, then you'll never know. So I've always sort of just give it a go. What's the worst that can happen type person.
Did you have a mentor or anybody who looked in terms of your career development, or any colleagues that you could talk to about that?
If I'm completely honest, I've been so extremely lucky with the people. I know I was going to say angels, which is awful because you had the podcast a couple of weeks ago on angels.
Don't do that.
I know. The wonderful guidance that I've had. I had excellent mentors, which they were known as when I was a student, but also my personal tutor. I don't know if I'm allowed to name names, but she's part of Maxine,
unless you're going to
Hayes.
allege something, don't do that.
She's a magnificent mental health nurse by background, and she's also a senior lecturer, and she was my personal tutor, and she, all throughout my, I suppose, not just nursing profession, but through my student nursing journey, she has been aspirational, supportive, kind. Even transitioning from a nurse to an academic, she's been, great. So I've been lucky to have really strong role models throughout, but also personally as well. As I said, my dad's an adult nurse, my mum is a lecturer, sort of works at the university by background. So I've always had people who understand and have always pushed me to be courageous and to take opportunities, and also to sort of pull on my strengths and to just go forwards with it. So I've been very lucky to have lots of people personally and professionally that have guided me through.
Yeah, it's important, I think, for sort of newly qualified nurses to look out for those people.
Absolutely.
People who can almost reflect you back to yourself, because sometimes you get so involved in the everyday tasks, you forget to see actually you need to change, you need to do something different, you need the next step. Particularly if you've got really comfy, it's quite hard to get progression, in my experience, to get progression internally in a service. Often you need to step outside to get to the next level in terms of yourself and your progression, but also for people to be able to see you that way. So when you do have people who are able to see your potential, it's really lovely to have that, and also to be that for other people, to be encouraging and developing colleagues is really key. I think it's a lovely part of nursing.
And I do think that's also why I've always been so, I suppose, focused on student experience and student journey. And I was really lucky to be the Link educational lead nurse, so Link student nurse at the community perinatal team, because I was always so thrilled with the nursing student nurse journey I had, and also I suppose wanted to emulate and help encourage that for our future nursing workforce, really. And I suppose hopefully that's what I'm wanting to do now, with students that are ongoing the course, to keep them motivated, to sort of help them through to the end, help them see that it's feasible, that once you've qualified, once you've registered, the impact that you can have and the wonderful, career that you can make out of the qualification, really.
Yeah. So you're in the community, you've got an educational practice education role. How did you make the transition then to come to full-time education?
So this is where it becomes a little bit more convoluted, and I don't mind sharing at all. But in my role as community mental health nurse, I became more interested in psychological therapies as well as in terms of treatment for mental health difficulties. So I'd spoken to my line manager at the time about opportunities to train in psychological therapies, and a position became available as a trainee cognitive behavioural therapist within NHS primary mental health care. So I again saw this as an opportunity for development, with the intention of sort of attaining that qualification and being able to bring that, to patients and be able to offer that. So I pursued that. I enrolled on the course, and as I've mentioned earlier, I always like to try things, and I'll always see things as an opportunity or a problem to solve or something to overcome, as opposed to a barrier. So I pursued the course. Unfortunately, it was during COVID, which obviously everyone experienced, but it probably wasn't the right thing for me to do at that time. A lot of the teaching was virtual, and for me, I struggled to learn in that manner. And I feel to some extent the approach required me to be Socratic, and I feel I was too much of a nurse, was some of the feedback I had. So unfortunately, I sort of completed 11 months, but didn't actually sort of finish the end. So I withdrew before the end of the course, so I didn't finish that qualification. A lot of stuff happened, personal life at the time, which just made things difficult, which again changed life. It happens. And initially I saw that as a big failure of mine. I saw that as me sort of, wasting time. What have I done for the last 11 months? I've, blah, 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 all of those, I suppose, negative cycle. But if anything, I learned to sort of almost CBT myself out of that hole. That actually in those 11 months, I met brilliant friends that I've got now. And if you don't try something, if you don't try it, you never learn. You never know. So tried the course, left with some brilliant skills, but returned to my position within the community mental health perinatal team, but was able to implement some of the low intensity CBT type skills and work through those with my patients, which ultimately helped me be able to still help patients meaningfully, just without being a CBT therapist.
But I think people do have that experience very frequently. That the skills that they have that make them a really good nurse mean that being a psychologist or going down CBT therapy, which is so specific, doesn't quite fit. That doesn't mean that it's not the right thing to do. And certainly nurses need to be psychologically skilled. So I think it writes that balance. And I think the other thing is, like, no one's journey is straightforward, is it? There is no wasted learning. So for anybody else who starts something and then changes their mind, change your mind. So what? It's fine. Like, we don't get cross with people who don't recover in a straight line, or don't progress in a straight line, or don't travel in a straight line. So why would you be different? But I think sometimes in nursing, we can hold ourselves to a different standard, or have a different expectation. Like, I should know this. It's like, why? Why should you know it?
Why are we not as nice to ourselves as we are? It's the whole practicing what we preach, isn't it? Which is...
David, I think Dave's got a question there.
Yeah, I was really interested, Tegan, when you were talking about kind of the influence from your dad, and then sort of saying a little bit later, you kind of got the nursing influence from your dad and the academia influence from your mum. I suppose I just wanted to kind of delve a little bit more into that, and sort of like, kind of what did they do that kind of meant that this is where you've ended up? And the reason why it really kind of triggered a thought in my head is that both of my parents were teachers. And the message that I got from them when I was a child was on no account go into teaching. So I suppose it's just, hearing someone else describe a really polar opposite kind of experience, just kind of what richness of that meant you got what you got.
Well, this sounds, and I won't go into too much detail, but my dad didn't go straight into nursing, as a spring chicken. He didn't go into nursing until my mum had my younger sister. And my mum was seeing how the nurses were all rushed off their feet, and the midwives, and were really struggling, and said to my dad, you could do this. You're a kind, compassionate, caring person. So off he went and did his nursing. And I think I was about 3 or 4 when I went to his graduation, or whenever he finished his course. So I was still little, but young, like old enough to remember it. And I remember growing up and feeling so proud to be able to say my dad's a nurse. Sorry, I get emotional.
It is something to be proud of, I think.
It is, it's wonderful. And I remember at school, we'd be sort of at, primary school, middle school, we're talking about nurses and, what our parents do. And I'd always say, oh, my dad's a nurse. Like, oh, he's not a woman. What? He's like, men can't be nurses. And I remember thinking, why can't they be? Like, why can't a man be a nurse? And I think I can just tell when he's been at work. Even now, he's a staff nurse on intensive care unit, and he's so compassionate and caring, and he's led a really, I think, whole giving life. And he's just inspired me to sort of want to give back. I know that sounds really cheesy, but it just made me think that's what I want to do. I want to be able to help make people's lives better, but also therefore gain that richness to feel like I've contributed to society in some meaningful way. So that was really how it started with the nursing thing.
It's my favourite thing about graduation, seeing everyone's family so proud of them. Walk around like that.
Oh, I know. And then when it came to mine 20 odd years later, both mum and dad were there, and it was emotional but lovely, and it just felt right. Everything was just, this is how it's meant to be. And I never considered academia. I never did. I always wanted to be a staff nurse on the ward, and that was me, happy, contented. But opportunities find their way.
What happened?
So I still in the community mental health perinatal team, but again, not necessarily itchy feet, but there was opportunities for progression. And I started to feel really confident and competent in my role, when, conscious competence. I was like, I've got this. I feel, I know what I'm doing. Unfortunately, to some extent, there was sort of a ceiling in terms of clinical care, that actually you can go to a certain point, and then that's the other route is operational or managerial type opportunities. So I applied for the operational team leader role, which was the only other, I suppose, career progression within the service at the time. And again, I'll go for things. I'll give things a go, because life's too short. and unfortunately was unsuccessful on 2 times going for that position. So
Yeah.
I kind of went away with it. Okay, it's not meant to be, and that's okay. And then a friend actually who works at Montfort University knew that I was the student link for the perinatal team, informed me of a position at Montfort University lecturing mental health nursing at the same time that I'd been or not been successful in these application processes or interview processes. And I sort of, again, thinking, oh, I won't get this. But what's the worst that can happen? You know, it's a wonderful opportunity. So I put my hat in the ring, and sort of a couple of years ago we moved towards Leicestershire. So it just, again, timing, it felt okay, see what happens. So applied, had the interview, felt lucky enough to get an interview, thought, okay, I won't get it though. And then somehow got the job. Still questioning.
What made you think you wouldn't get it? Because I mean, was that just like a self-protection thing, or did you genuinely think, might as well just try it?
I genuinely.
You got a CV filled in.
No, well, this is it. I genuinely did everything to my best of my ability. I spoke to the person responsible for putting out the job, sort of registered my interest. Really thought about it and thought this would be amazing. I would love to be able to contribute to student nurses' journey on a bigger level, and therefore have a direct impact on patient care. And I think I already had in my head, it's a senior lecturing post, not a lecturing post, you know. So I'm not a lecturer, so that why would they give me a senior lecturing position? Also, I felt, and I've had numerous conversations since to stamp this out a little bit, I was only 5 years post-qualification, post-registration at the time, well, 5.5 years. Why would they give it to me? And I was also aware of people who were interviewing on that day. There was, I think, a fair few people went for the position who were already lecturers in mental health nursing. So I genuinely held the belief, I'm not going to get this job. I don't think it was a protective thing at this point. But I also thought, even if I don't get it, I love my job. So it's a win-win scenario, and I remember my line manager now calling me the day after saying, you've got the job. And I think I said, shut up to her on the phone because I was not
interesting.
Great first impression. But I just felt so honoured and lucky to be in, again, a position. But I think also because I'd almost been unsuccessful twice in a position that I'd wanted, it kind of felt like the right thing to do at that time.
Yeah. I think you just end up in the right job in the end, don't you?
People
at the right
have
time.
said that. Yeah.
Because I have to say, nursing management is a tough, thankless job.
In hindsight, I believe the person who did get the job is leaving also, which makes me think actually maybe I couldn't have hacked that, and I am where I am, and I've got no regrets at all.
Make yourself happy with the choices you've got. I think a lot of people worry about making the wrong choice, but the fact is, just pick one and make it work, and if it doesn't work, then make another one. It's fine.
Absolutely. And the beautiful thing I think about nursing, the NHS, there are so many avenues and doors, and just because you apply for a job or start a job somewhere, there's hundreds or thousands more, and not even just in the UK. You know, there's opportunities around the globe. One of my old line manager now leads up a unit in Dubai. You know, you can literally do anything.
I had a very happy time working in Sydney. Very nice.
Oh, wonderful.
After coming out of the Maudsley, where I was stressed up to the eyeballs. So, I mean, like, everything changes. I mean, and Dave, you've made this choice as well, haven't you, to move from direct patient care to different types of nursing?
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because I remember when I started my nursing career and imagining that I would be a nurse in the NHS for the next 45 years. And that would just be kind of it. And to imagine anything on that first day different would have felt really kind of alien and you know, not going to happen. And I suppose it's that thing, isn't it, sometimes that careers, the the jump that you face between the first day and the 20th year can be quite dramatic. But actually, you look at the
It's incremental.
little steps that you take, and you think, oh, actually, it didn't feel that big. So for me, it was kind of working in the NHS, working in a role that was commissioned by the NHS but paid for through local authority funding, then coming out and sort of ending up in the union. It was kind of sort of little steps that meant that it was quite a dramatic change. And I think you're absolutely right that one of the things that, you know, I would probably be less sort of anxious about saying to my kids to go into nursing that my parents were in terms of going into teaching is how wide it feels. And like you say, you know, like you say, Nicky, I know you kind of had to have a part of a career in Australia. You know, one of the colleagues that I worked with at Unite kind of worked in Saudi, you know, worked in lots of different areas of nursing. So it's amazing, isn't it?
My retirement.
Yeah, and kind of thinking about the members that I've met, you know, gone over to Gibraltar to meet Unite members, been to, you know, Germany for those that worked in SAFA, you know, the supporting people that work in the armed forces. So it's unbelievable, isn't it, when you kind of take that step back and think, wow, the opportunities are there. And I suppose in some ways it's a bit funny for me because I kind of think, well, I'm still sat in, you know, my front room in kind of Greater Manchester, you know, where I kind of started my career. So yeah, in some ways huge, in some ways quite narrow.
It does have that flexibility as well. I mean, so when I was in Australia, we used to have a lot of part-time nurses, and I worked with a part-time oceanographer and a part-time nurse. So he would go off on the boat for a while, and then when it got too wintry, he'd come back and just do his nursing over the winter. And I also worked with a lady who was a stunt person and a nurse. So she went to I think it was Universal Studios in Sydney. So there was all sorts of people, I think, doing all sorts of jobs and managing sort of childcare and hobbies and interests. And I love that about it. And whilst we're going to come to you just a second, Tegan, to talk about what it was like being in academia isn't just one thing. You can be in research, you can be going back to project work, you can be liaising with external. I do a lot of work with voluntary sector still. So there's loads of ways that you still stay connected to nursing. You don't leave it. You just kind of grow your understanding of what it can involve.
Absolutely. But also, I suppose, the impact that being in academia that you can still have on nursing and its practices. I think that's something that I've been absolutely overwhelmed with in a brilliant way at Montfort University, is the roles that I've been able to take on within even my first couple of weeks, you know, being sort of allocated academic assessor for students that are out on placement. And I think it's helped me because obviously sort of I moved from a different county, familiarise myself with the different service provision that different trusts have, and be able to sort of meet placement providers and still linking with placements via students, can go out to see them on clinical practice and still have that influence and making sure that our students are, you know, practicing safely, you know, meeting their professional values and also, you know, doing what they should be doing to register and meet that, you know, those standards.
Yeah. There is something kind of really lovely about seeing the story from different sides as well. It's like if you work in inpatients, then you go and work in the community and you see that progression of recovery. Being someone who's supported students in practice and then coming in to be an academic advisor, you just get to see all the different aspects of that kind of journey.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting. So tell us, what was it like in your first 6 months in education? How was it different?
So I'm still 5 months this. Oh no, tell a lie. It's 6 months this month. In oh gosh, that's really scary. It was really scary. It was really scary, but in a wonderful way. I think again, I felt consciously competent, and then went to feeling completely consciously incompetent, to use phrases. But I think what's genuinely really helped is the support that I've had. I felt a little bit out of my depth. I did at times question, have I done the right thing? Because I went from being someone that people asked questions and asked advice from to having like feeling like I was asking all of the questions about everything, which is a little bit unsettling. But there hasn't been a single time that I've regretted the decision to leave clinical practice to come into academia. I felt it was challenging. It's a really steep learning curve, because I feel you go from doing the do to teaching the do, which makes you question, do you know the do? And often, actually, when you're teaching it, you realise that you know a lot more than you think you do, if that makes sense. So there's certain scenarios or certain, I suppose, topics that you'll teach, and actually it makes you think, I actually feel really competent at this, which I think if you shy away from the things that make you feel anxious, you'll only always feel anxious about them. So taking this opportunity, I think, has reinforced to me my adaptability, I suppose, reinforced that it's okay to change. It's okay to do things that scare you.
Yeah.
But also, I think it opens your eyes to again, more opportunities that are available that are not only going to help you professionally, but personally. I felt my well-being, sleep, I felt able to switch off. I've not had the same fears or anxieties about, I suppose, the level of risk that you would face as a
different
care
kind of
coordinator.
responsibility, isn't it? It's indirect responsibility. Yeah.
Someone told me, I think it's my line manager, there's no such thing as an urgent academic emergency. There's no, it's not the same, which is really freeing. I felt almost in a way oddly refreshed the last 6 months, even though it's been a career change completely to some extent. It's one of the best decisions I've ever made. And it's hard because you'll have students that are wonderful and really excelling, and it's then, I suppose, wanting to help people stay at that level and not let their enthusiasm go, and trying to keep people motivated and engaged and on point and keep people up. I think it's important, though, that we acknowledge that it's not for everybody, and that's something that I'm finding particularly difficult as within my role, really, to sort of accept that it isn't for everybody, and have to sort of support practice assessors' decisions about not passing students, and that's really hard. But also
an interesting thing, though, isn't it? Because it comes back to that inborn sense of nursing that some people have, they're wanting to help and save people, and then you have to get to a stage where, like, actually, my job as a nurse is to make sure that service users have the best care possible, and this person isn't in the place to provide the best care possible. And whilst I care about them, as a lecturer, and I want to see them do well, my job as a nurse is the first job, and that is to maintain standard. And this person isn't in the place to do that right now.
And
it's
that's absolutely right. You are so right. You've hit the nail on the head, and that's exactly it. Yeah, you're always, I suppose, a nurse first, and it is about protecting patients and maintaining safety, and also helping maybe students realise that actually maybe something else is for them, and that's okay. It's okay again to try things. Yeah.
But again, it's sometimes you have different levels going on at the same time. And I think what you're saying about having nursing skills up here and then academic understanding here is really stressful. But it's the same kind of journey that someone who's been a nursing assistant and then comes in as a student has to face, isn't it? When they know everything in practice, the practice makes them feel so at home, and they have to let go of that role that they know to become the thing they're going to be. And if you aren't able to let go of your comfort zone, you stay trapped. You're trapped yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose having that, being open to new opportunities and actively seeking them as well, and networking and as you say, sort of linking, finding out what else is available, and never sort of shutting yourself off to any ideas.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions come through. Look. One of them is, you spoke about having imposter syndrome. How do you overcome imposter syndrome? Well, if you knew that, you could bottle that answer, couldn't you?
Wow.
And I guess the other question, just to summarize it a little, is looking at what do practice nurses need to know about academia, and what do nurses in academia need to know to help people in practice? So two questions. One about imposter syndrome first, perhaps.
Yeah, so imposter syndrome. I've heard someone say we shouldn't call it imposter syndrome, because by even calling it that, we're enforcing the fact that we're imposters. So I try not to call it that, but it feels like that. So the way I've overcome that, or still trying to overcome that, is by just going for opportunities that scare me, and not doing something because I feel I'm going to fail. So it's seeking opportunities, putting myself forward for them, and not being scared to fail. You know, the acronym first attempt in learning, rewiring how you see failure, that we're all humans, we're all you know, capable of making mistakes and errors and doing things that, you know, we might think, oh, why did I do that? And that's okay, but we can bounce back. We're, you know, we can, I suppose, sometimes give ourselves a much harder time than we need to. So I think it's trusting ourselves and putting ourselves in you know, positions where we can take on new opportunities.
And the second part of that question from Adrian. Hello, Adrian. Saying about anxiety around losing my clinical skills. So how did you deal with that? Because that's something it's everybody.
I'm with you there completely, Adrian. And what I've found really beneficial is that I'm obviously retaining my PIN. Is I still plan to continue being a nurse. So I, over Christmas, was still working on the bank, on the ward, to keep up my nursing skills. But geographically, because of where we live, I'm looking to sort of register with the more local nursing bank. But I think also it's about I suppose, keeping in touch with clinical placement areas, and also reading the evidence-based literature, keeping ourselves up to date with what we're teaching our students, you know, making sure that we're informing them of the best clinical practice that's relevant in the here and now. But dabbling if you're still wanting to, because for me, I think that's really important in still being a nurse.
And what about sort of like how each kind of side of practice can help each other?
Yeah, so in terms of practice influence academia, so I think in terms of being able to teach nursing skills, I suppose we need to have to some extent that practical underpinning to be able to deliver the theoretical. I think it's difficult because there's always going to be lecturers that have been out of clinical practice at you know, quite a long time. And that's why I think we need to, I suppose, be having meaningful conversations with our students about what their experiences are on clinical placement, so that we can use that in conversations and sort of keep ourselves up to date with how things are. And what was the other side, sorry?
How practice can help academia and how academia can help practice.
So in terms of academia helping practice, obviously, you know, the course is 50% theory and 50% practical. So in order for, I suppose, students and, you know, future nurses to be able to practice effectively, there needs to be the awareness of the theoretical underpinnings, you know, the evidence base for why we deliver these treatments, or why we offer these interventions, or why we don't do these things anymore because they're not safe, you know. So I suppose it's important that someone is informed of both to really have that full picture. If I'm perfectly honest as well, I think it would be useful for more, I suppose, practical opportunities like simulation. I've discussed that in the mental health nurse academic meetings before, to sort of almost emulate when people are at university, to have more of those experiences, but in a, I suppose, assessed way by sort of academics. I think that's something that we're hopefully looking to implement to help our mental health and learning disability students to feel more competent in responding to certain scenarios that they might not encounter on placement. So
it's important, I think, that the nursing experience is porous, and that people can get back in practice, or that people can be involved, because I've done things like that, project work and interviewing for practice and all that kind of interaction, and also looking at kind of ratifying other people's courses as well. So being able to give support around stuff like that, and around the kind of preceptorship thing as well, which has been fabulous. But also I think it's really important to make sure that senior colleagues from practice and junior are able to come in and do interviewing, are able to come in and do teaching sessions. Really have that flow of ideas going back and forward. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And there, I suppose, we're trying, I suppose, to build those relationships with our NHS Partnership Trust, so that actually they know what we are, I suppose, teaching, so that they can also emulate that with their students. But like everything, it's always work in progress, isn't it?
It is. And I'm looking at our time now. We're coming to the end. And I wondered if I could just go around maybe to David and then to you, to see if anyone's got any sort of last thoughts or any anything to think about that kind of that transferring skills and that journeying between different types of nursing practice? Perhaps we'll come to Dave first. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I don't think so. I think has always been a really good conversation. Always, Nicky, got the skills to kind of get the best out of our guests, and
I love a chit chat. Oh.
Yeah, so it's been really interesting. And like I say, just kind of reflecting on some of my own experiences as you've been chatting. I'm sure the audience will have been doing the same. And I suppose that kind of thing about the importance of getting those messages out there, that whilst there can be lots to frustrate about the professions of nursing and of academia, there's also great aspects to it as well. Yeah, it's been great to listen to the conversation tonight.
What about you, Tegan? Any last words of wisdom there from your journey?
I suppose what I would I would say to myself is, as nurses, I think we'd need to be kinder to ourselves, and even if we don't achieve what we initially set out to achieve, there's always going to be another way, and that we're great, guys, we're doing good, so just let's keep on and never forget why we went into the profession, that we have so much to give, and that we have such an impact and influence. And I know at times there's variables that are extraneous and we don't have control over, but always that's something that gets me through all the time, is remembering why I went into it and how much of a positive impact we can have on patients and their families. So that's all I'd really say. But yeah, it's been absolutely wonderful.
Lovely. I don't think anyone's going to top that. I can just see that next week we've got Courageous Wellbeing for Nurses, Strategists for Renewal, which is it kind of feeds on from this really, and that's with Ed Lord and maybe Donna Gaffney. So thank you very much to our special guest Tegan. Very lovely to see you today, and to Adrian, and to all our colleagues for joining in and watching.
Thank you for having me.
Good night.
Night.